After a horrific car accident, Sarah vanishes without a trace. Her body is never found, the case is closed, and her loved ones slowly move on. All except one. 7 years later, her husband, Lucas, happens to spot the face of his missing wife in a photo printed in a small-town newspaper. Before we dive in, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from. Your support helps us create more deep and gripping stories just for you. There's more to come. The newspaper crinkled slightly in Lucas Rain's trembling hands, a quiet sound in the stillness of his cluttered kitchen. Morning light slanted through the blinds, cutting across half-drunk coffee, unopened bills, and a dog-eared stack of old case notes. But none of that existed now. Not really. Not after he saw her. She was there, blurry in the background of a local interest photo. A crowd gathered for a summer festival in some remote town in Montana, Old Pine, according to the caption. Red balloons, lemonade stands, smiling families. But none of that mattered. It was the woman near the edge of the frame, barely in focus, looking away from the camera. Lucas didn't blink. He didn't breathe. The newspaper slipped from his fingers and fluttered to the floor. He dropped to his knees, palms flat against the page, eyes scanning every pixel of her face. Dark hair pulled into a loose braid, a pale scarf around her neck, Sarah's scarf. He'd given it to her on their last anniversary. No one could fake that. But it wasn't just the scarf. It was the way she stood, spine straight but guarded, eyes soft but distant. That unmistakable tilt of her chin. Even out of focus, Lucas knew her like his own breath. It was her. After 7 years. After the wreck. After everyone else had stopped looking. His chest tightened, his pulse roaring in his ears like a hurricane. The room spun. He leaned back on the cold tile floor, eyes wide, staring at the ceiling fan that did nothing to cool the fire building in his gut. Sarah. The memory struck him like lightning. The crash. Rain hammering the windshield. Wipers squealing against the glass. Her scream. The sharp turn. The shriek of twisting metal. The icy plunge into the river. And then, nothing. He'd woken up on the shore, half-conscious, lungs burning, blood mixing with mud. The car had been gone. She had been gone. Just like that. They never found the vehicle. Never found a body. Just empty air and silence. The sheriff said it was the current. Said the river had taken her. Said he should move on. But Lucas never believed that. While others lit candles and held hands at the memorial, Lucas searched riverbanks. Hired divers. Printed missing person flyers until his printer died from exhaustion. Every month, he left messages on old forums, posted online tips, haunted the police station until even the receptionist stopped making eye contact. 7 years. 7 years of talking to a ghost. And now this photo. He grabbed his phone and snapped a picture of the article, hands shaking uncontrollably. His coffee cup tipped and spilled across the counter, brown spreading into paper. He didn't notice. His heart felt like it would tear through his ribs. Sarah, he whispered, like saying her name might make her real again. The sky had been bleeding that night, gray and furious, dumping rain like the heavens were trying to wash something away. Lucas remembered the sound first. Thunder cracked open the sky as their car skidded across the slick mountain road, tires shrieking against the asphalt. Sarah's hands had clenched the seat, eyes darting to him with a flicker of fear. That was the last time he truly saw her. "Lucas, slow down," she cried. But the curve came too fast. The world tilted. One wheel left the edge of the crumbling cliff. Gravity tore the car from the road. Then came the plunge, metal against rock, glass exploding like firecrackers. The river below was swollen, violent, waiting to devour them. And it did. He'd been thrown clear somehow, spat from the chaos like a broken toy. When he came to, lying face down in gravel and pine needles, the storm was still raging. The car was gone. So was she. He'd screamed her name until his throat bled. Rescuers came the next morning. Helicopters buzzed the area. Divers searched the river for weeks. They found scraps of the car's bumper and one of her earrings tangled in river debris. But not Sarah. Not her body. Not even a piece of clothing. Just nothing. After months of searching, the investigation stalled. The sheriff shook his head every time Lucas brought new maps or wild theories. "She's gone, son. Let her rest." Lucas refused. Something in his chest wouldn't let him bury her in silence. The police closed the file after 2 years. Presumed dead, it read. An empty coffin was buried beside her mother in a green hillside cemetery. Lucas stood alone that day, rain soaking the casket as though the sky knew it was a lie. He never visited the grave again. Because Sarah wasn't in the ground. She was somewhere. He held on to everything. Her scarf, the book she read, the letters she once scribbled on napkins. Their old wedding photo, cracked at the edges, sat beside his bed. He hadn't changed a thing in her closet. Her scent, faint and fading, still clung to one of her jackets. He'd buried his face in it more nights than he could remember. And the scarf, soft, dusty blue. He slept with it curled in his hands like a prayer. Friends gave up. His sister begged him to move on. You have to accept it, Lucas. She's gone. But how do you mourn a ghost? How do you stop listening for footsteps at the door when the silence itself sounds like her voice? That newspaper photo hadn't given him closure. It had cracked the dam. He rose from the floor, scarf still wrapped around his wrist like a lifeline. His eyes were burning, his breath coming fast. 7 years of buried hopes surged inside him like that river had on the night she vanished. The police station in Bozeman hadn't changed much in 7 years. Same cracked vinyl chairs, same stale coffee smell, same rusted badge mounted above the receptionist's desk. But to Lucas, it felt smaller now, colder. Sergeant Miles leaned back in his chair with a sigh that bordered on theatrical. You're back, he said, not even trying to mask his weariness. Let me guess you saw another shadow in a crowd. Lucas pulled out his phone and slid it across the desk. The image on the screen, a zoomed-in photo of the woman in Old Pine, trembled ever so slightly as Miles picked it up. That's her, Lucas said quietly. It's Sarah. Miles squinted. That's a blurry photo of a woman at a town fair. Could be anyone. It's her, Lucas snapped, more forcefully now. The scarf, the way she... Just look at her face, damn it. The sergeant exhaled sharply, setting the phone down as if it offended him. Lucas, I know you loved her. I know this wrecked you. But it's been 7 years. We searched, we followed every lead. You filed more reports than anyone in this county. You've chased down tips from psychics, tabloid blogs, some guy in Wyoming who thought his waitress had the same smile as your wife. Lucas flinched. That one had cost him 2 months of salary and a heartache that still ached. Miles shook his head. She's gone. And you're chasing ghosts. Lucas leaned forward, voice low and urgent. And what if I'm not? What if she's alive and doesn't know who she is? What if she lost her memory and she's living a life that's not even hers? The sergeant blinked, but his expression remained unmoved. You think she just woke up one day with amnesia and wandered off to a festival in Montana? Lucas nodded. I know how it sounds. But it's her. Miles stood up. You need to move on, man. Find a grief group. Talk to someone who can help you heal. He paused. And for the love of God, stop bringing me newspaper clippings and conspiracy theories. He'd called his sister the night before. Told her he might have found Sarah. Again. Lucas, she'd said softly, this isn't healthy. You're torturing yourself. Even his oldest friend, Mark, had stopped returning his calls. Everyone had built their lives around the fact that Sarah was gone. But Lucas? He'd built his around the chance, no matter how small, that she wasn't. He looked at the photo one more time, his voice barely a whisper. She's not a ghost. She's just waiting to be found. Old Pine, Montana, was the kind of place that existed more in postcards than in real life. Lucas drove, and just as the sun dipped low over the mountains, washing the narrow streets in golden light and casting long shadows over rows of timber-frame storefronts, hanging flower baskets swayed gently from lampposts. Kids rode bikes. An elderly man waved from a rocking chair on his porch. Even the air smelled like something out of a forgotten season. Pine, wood smoke, and something sweeter he couldn't place. It was too perfect, too staged. Lucas pulled up in front of the local diner, its neon sign humming lazily against the fading sky. Maggie's Pie House. The bell above the door jingled as he stepped inside. Soft jazz played from a crackling speaker. The waitress behind the counter smiled instantly, bright, mechanical. New face, she said, grabbing a menu. Passing through, something like that. He took a seat at the counter, glancing around. Locals filled the booths, smiling, laughing, forks clinking against ceramic. A world untouched by time. I'm looking for someone. Thought maybe you'd recognize her. He pulled up the same photo on his phone. The woman in the crowd. Her scarf half obscured by a child balloon. The waitress took one look and froze. Just for a second. Then the smile returned, tighter this time. I'm sorry, no idea. Lucas frowned. You barely looked. She shrugged, sliding him a glass of water. A lot of people passed through during the festival. Hard to keep track. He nodded slowly but didn't believe her. Next stop was the post office. Then the library. Then a gas station on the edge of town. Every time he showed the photo, the reaction was eerily similar. Polite confusion, mild discomfort, then a quick retreat behind some vague excuse. Oh, sorry, don't think I've seen her. I'm not from here, couldn't say. I just work nights. Maybe try the sheriff. But Lucas wasn't ready to do that. Not yet. By dusk, he was back in his truck, watching Old Pine fade into the quiet embrace of evening. Streetlights flickered on. Curtains drew closed. Music drifted from open windows. The town had retreated inward like a turtle pulling its head into its shell. He checked into a roadside inn on the outskirts, the Timber Lodge. The front desk clerk, a pale man in flannel, gave him a key and too much eye contact. You looking for something in particular? The clerk asked casually. Lucas didn't answer, just smiled faintly and said, just passing through. In his room, he sat in the dark with the photo lit by his phone screen. The woman's face haunted him, not just because it looked like Sarah, but because no one would admit it. He'd seen that look before. In war zones. In corrupt towns where truth was buried under polite lies. It was the look of people who were afraid to talk. The Old Pine Public Library stood at the end of Main Street. White clapboard siding, ivy curling up one side, and a carved wooden sign that read, "Whispers live between these walls." Lucas stood across the street, heart hammering so loudly he could barely hear the quiet wind rustling through the trees. It was her. Through the window, bathed in the amber warmth of late morning light, she moved with quiet purpose between the shelves, sorting books, laughing softly with a young girl, her dark hair falling over one shoulder in a braid he'd once helped her tie every Sunday morning. She looked the same, and completely different. Lucas pressed his hand against the cool hood of his truck, trying to steady the tremble in his chest. His pulse surged in his throat like a second heartbeat. He wasn't ready. He thought he was, but now, seeing her in the flesh, alive, real, smiling, he felt like a man watching a ghost walk out of his dreams. He crossed the street. Every step felt like walking through water. He entered the library, and the smell of old paper and cedar washed over him, achingly familiar. Her voice floated out from the reading corner. "Grace, do we have more of the dog books?" the little girl asked. Grace. The name hit him like ice water. He stepped into view just as the woman turned to answer. Their eyes met, and nothing happened. No spark of recognition. No trembling lips. No breathless reunion. Just a polite, curious smile from a stranger. Yes, she asked. Lucas' mouth opened, then closed again. Her eyes, those same sea glass green eyes, watched him without a flicker of memory. The voice was softer now, maybe aged by time, but it was hers. It carved through him like wind through canyon walls. He started, heart twisting. I think I sorry. Wrong person. Her brow furrowed, just briefly, but she nodded and turned back to the child. Lucas stumbled back outside, breath catching in his throat like he'd swallowed fire. He gripped the railing, staring at his own reflection in the window. His skin looked pale, his eyes sunken. 7 years of grief clung to his shoulders like wet clothes. Grace. That's what they called her. Not Sarah Raines. Not the woman he married. She worked here, lived here, laughed here. As if she had never known him. She didn't recognize him. But he would know her in a crowd of 1,000. Blindfolded. Asleep. He sat on the library steps for a long time, watching the wind dance through the maple trees lining the street. She was alive. That was all that mattered. For now. And maybe she didn't know him. But something inside her would. It had to. Because if it didn't, then what had he been holding on to all these years? Lucas wasn't proud of what he was doing. He hadn't followed someone like this since his years in Army intelligence. And even then, it felt cleaner. More justified. But this was personal. He sat in his rented truck across from the cottage at the edge of town. Small, red-roofed, nestled into the woods. Her cottage. Or rather, Grace's. A white picket fence, flower beds, a hummingbird feeder swinging in the breeze. She had a life here, and she wasn't alone. Lucas first saw the older man 2 nights ago, broad-shouldered despite his age, white hair cropped close to his head, eyes cold, even from a distance. Uniform, gun, badges. He was the town sheriff, Sheriff Howard Kent, according to the nameplate outside the station and the whispers he picked up from townsfolk who shut down the second he mentioned Grace. They lived together. That much was clear. She cooked dinner. He brought in firewood. They moved like two pieces of a well-oiled machine, silent, functional, oddly distant. There was no warmth, no intimacy, but there was control. Lucas saw it in the way Kent watched her, every move, every glance, as if afraid she might vanish. Or remember. Lucas watched her hang laundry in the yard that morning. Her face turned toward the sun, eyes closed for a moment, arms raised, like a woman trying to remember what freedom felt like. And then she turned suddenly, glancing toward the trees. Right toward him. He ducked behind the wheel, heart slamming into his ribs. He waited 5 minutes before peeking again. She was gone. Later that day, Lucas returned to town, trying once more to gather scraps of truth. At the general store, the clerk barely looked up when he asked, "Do you know Grace Thomas?" A pause. "Sure," the clerk said. "Sweet woman. Keeps to herself. Was she always with Kent?" Another pause. "Shorter this time, I guess. Can't recall when she got here. Few years, maybe." Lucas nodded, thanked him, left. But his stomach turned. No one ever remembered when she arrived. No one ever saw her past. Only the version they'd been given. He passed two old men on a bench outside the barber shop. They fell silent as he walked by. One of them muttered something under his breath. Lucas turned, met their eyes. Both looked away. This town was sewn shut with quiet fear. Back at the inn, he stared at the photo again, and then at the woman he saw each day now. Her face was the same. Her voice, her hands, even the subtle scar beneath her left eyebrow. He remembered the day she got it, slipping on ice at the lake. It's her. It's Sarah. But it wasn't. She looked through him without recognition. She folded laundry the same way, but her eyes, were empty of everything they once held for him. So what did that make her? A lie? Or someone who had been made into one? Lucas didn't plan it. He told himself he'd wait longer, gather more facts, find a smarter angle. But when he saw her walking alone that afternoon, basket in one hand, brown curls loose in the breeze, his feet moved before his mind could catch up. He crossed the street, heart pounding, breath shallow, like a teenager chasing a dream he was sure would vanish if he blinked. She turned when she heard his steps. Up close, she looked younger than he remembered, less weighed down by grief. There was color in her cheeks. She wore a linen dress and a pale cardigan, and in that moment, she looked like someone untouched by tragedy. For a heartbeat, he hesitated. Then she smiled politely. "Can I help you?" Lucas's mouth went dry. I think we've met." Her smile faltered slightly. "I don't think so. My name's Lucas." She nodded slowly, polite but guarded. "I'm Grace." A silence stretched between them like a taut wire. He looked in her eyes, desperate for something. Recognition, confusion, anything. But there was only wariness. "Do you mind if I ask," he began gently, "how long you've lived in Old Pine?" She shifted her weight. "A few years, I guess. I don't really keep count. Where were you before?" Her fingers tightened slightly on the basket. "I'm sorry, but I don't really know who you are, and I'm not comfortable with these questions." "I'm sorry," Lucas said quickly, backing off slightly. You look like someone I lost." She blinked. That made her pause. "I get that sometimes," she said. "I have one of those faces, I guess." A small black dog trotted up to her then, panting, tail wagging. She knelt to stroke its head, her face softening. "Come on, Mercy," she said gently. "Let's go." Lucas froze. The name struck him like a thunderclap. Mercy. He hadn't heard that name aloud in years. That was their dog. The same name, same tone. A rescue mutt they'd found during their first year of marriage. Mercy had died a year before the accident, but Sarah had always said she'd get another someday. The moment her life felt whole again. He stared at the dog, mouth half open. It wasn't the same breed, but the coincidence was too perfect. Grace, or Sarah, noticed his expression. "What?" He shook his head, clearing the weight pressing behind his eyes. Nothing, he lied. She stood, now visibly tense. I really should go. Lucas took a step back. Of course. I'm sorry if I scared you. She hesitated, as if something tugged at her. But she said nothing. That night, Grace dreamed of water. It wasn't the first time, but this one was different. Colder. Vivid. She was sinking, arms flailing in slow motion, headlights flickering above the surface, her lungs burning. She tried to scream, but her voice came out as bubbles. Something metallic screeched in her ears, twisting, folding. A shadow, a man's silhouette, reached toward her from the surface. And just before darkness swallowed her whole, she heard it. Someone calling her name. But not Grace. Sarah. She jolted awake, gasping, tangled in sweat-soaked sheets. The room around her was dim, wooden-paneled, filled with heavy furniture. Mercy whined quietly at the foot of the bed. Her hand shook. That voice, it felt like it knew her. She got up, wrapped herself in a robe, and went to the bathroom. Her reflection stared back. Same dark eyes, same birthmark near her collarbone. But there was something foreign about her face tonight, like it wasn't entirely hers. Behind her, a creak. She turned. Sheriff Kent stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching. You okay? He asked flatly. She forced a smile. Just a bad dream. You've had a lot of those lately. She nodded, clutching her robe tighter. It's probably nothing. Kent stepped closer, hand brushing a lock of hair from her face. Maybe you should stop spending so much time in town. People talk. There was something in his voice, possessive, measured. Her smile faded. Talk about what? You. Strangers. Men asking questions. Her stomach twisted. He was just lost. Was he? His eyes narrowed. Because he's still here. And I don't like the way he looks at you. Grace turned away, retreating to the sink. I don't even know him. Kent's hand settled on her shoulder. Heavy. Then let's keep it that way. She nodded silently. But long after he went back to bed, she sat awake at the kitchen table, eyes fixed on the window, mind racing. That voice in the dream. That name. Sarah. Who was she really? Across town, Lucas was digging. He sat in the back of the Timber Lodge lobby, laptop open, half a dozen windows pulled up. His screen glowed with public records, archive sites, and backdoor searches he remembered from his intelligence days. He followed the trail like a bloodhound, chasing a scent. Slow, methodical, relentless. Grace Thomas didn't exist until 7 years ago. Her Social Security number was issued in Oregon, 6 months after Sarah disappeared. Her employment record began at the Old Pine Library with a handwritten reference from Sheriff Howard Kent. Before that, nothing. No medical records. No family. No tax history. Just a woman who materialized in the system like smoke. Lucas knew something was wrong the second he stepped into the small medical clinic on the east end of Old Pine. The air was too still. The receptionist smiled too tightly. And when he asked for Grace Thomas's medical records, the shift in her posture was almost imperceptible, but unmistakable. I'm sorry, she said, her fingers already poised over the keyboard. That information is confidential. I'm her husband, he lied smoothly. She didn't even blink. Then you'll need to provide a signed release. From the patient. Lucas leaned forward, lowering his voice. Can you at least tell me if she was admitted here 7 years ago? I'm afraid I can't confirm or deny that. He held up his phone, showing her the blurry festival photo. This woman, she showed up here with no ID, no history, and 6 months later she had a new name. Someone helped her. I just want to know who. The woman's eyes flicked toward the back room, just for a second. Then she smiled again. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Lucas left, but not far. He waited in his truck for over an hour, watching the windows, watching the people who came and went. Eventually, he pulled away. He didn't notice the black SUV until it was too late. They came at him outside the Timber Lodge. It was just past midnight. He'd gone out for air, a cup of bad vending machine coffee in his hand, mind racing with fragmented theories and timelines. The parking lot was empty, dark except for the flicker of a single faulty light. Then footsteps behind him. Too close. Too fast. He turned. Too slow. A fist cracked across his jaw, sending him crashing into the gravel. The hot sting of pain blurred his vision. Another kick landed in his ribs. 2 men. No faces. Just black coats, gloved hands, surgical precision. "This is your warning," one of them muttered, voice deep and void of emotion. "Leave town. She's my wife." The second man knelt beside him, yanking his collar, so their faces were inches apart. "She's not yours anymore." Then darkness. When Lucas came to, he was slumped against his truck. His head throbbed. One eye was swelling shut, and the windshield shattered. Tires slashed. The men were gone. Silence returned like a curtain dropping. But they made one mistake. They thought pain would stop him. But for 7 years, pain had been his only companion. And now, with Sarah so close, it wasn't a threat. It was fuel. Lucas found her in the most unlikely place. An antique shop on the edge of town, nestled between a boarded-up mill and a crumbling chapel. He hadn't gone in for answers. He was looking for a phone charger. Instead, he found a crack in the silence. She was behind the counter, pale hands sorting through a box of faded postcards. Late 60s, maybe early 70s. Glasses slipping down her nose. Her name tag read Irene. When Lucas asked about old hospital records, she gave him a strange look. "Why would you want those?" she asked, voice hoarse with time. He hesitated. "I'm trying to find someone. She may have been brought to the clinic here around 7 years ago, after a car accident." Irene froze, eyes still on the postcards. Slowly, she set them down and looked up. "You her family?" "I'm her husband." She stared for a long moment, as if weighing truth against illusion. Then, quietly, she walked to the back of the shop. Lucas thought she was gone, but a minute later, she returned with a shoebox. Inside, photographs, notes, cassette tapes, and one worn-out staff ID. She set on the counter like a confession. "I was a nurse at Old Pine General until 2019, she said. "We shut down a few years back. They moved us into that new clinic with all the screens and none of the heart." Lucas looked up. "Did you see her?" Irene nodded slowly. "She came in after a storm. Local hikers found her near the river, unconscious. Broken ribs, deep bruising, severe head trauma. But no ID, no name." His throat tightened. She didn't speak. She didn't remember. Nothing. Not her name, not where she was from. Just flinching at loud noises and crying in her sleep. Her voice softened. "We called her Jane Doe." Lucas blinked rapidly, holding back the rush behind his eyes. "She stayed with us for 3 weeks. Then," Irene hesitated, her jaw tightening. "Then the sheriff came." Lucas straightened. "Kent." She nodded grimly. "He said he'd found a place for her. Said she needed to be somewhere quiet, away from stress. Signed some kind of transfer paper. Took her himself." "Did she agree?" Irene's lips tightened. She didn't argue. But I don't think she understood what was happening. She trusted him. He was kind of first. Almost fatherly. Lucas leaned forward. "Did you keep any records?" She shook her head. "Most of it's gone. Purged when the building was sold. But She opened a shoebox, pulling out an old microcassette. "I kept one of the intake interviews. I don't know why. I guess it didn't sit right." He took the tape gently, as if it might vanish. "Thank you," he whispered. Irene placed a hand over his. "Whatever you're doing, be careful. Sheriff Kent isn't just a cop in a small town. He owns this place." Lucas nodded. Then it's time someone reminded him truth doesn't belong to him. The door to the Old Pine Rehabilitation Center archives wasn't locked, but it should have been. Lucas slipped in just before dawn, his face still bruised, jaw aching with every breath. He moved like a shadow, silent and precise, down the sterile hallway lit only by flickering emergency bulbs. The building was barely operational these days, an echo of its former self, filled more with dust than patients. He knew what he was looking for: video logs, patient intake, 2017, the date Irene had given him. The records room was tucked behind a metal door marked storage. The lock was old. Lucas picked it in under 30 seconds. Inside, shelves loomed like forgotten tombstones, box after box of unlabeled tapes and hard drives, most coated with years of neglect. But someone had tried to clean this one section. The dust stopped halfway down the shelf. A cluster of drives, newer, touched. He plugged the first one into his laptop, pulse fluttering in his ears. Static. More static. Then, a room. White walls. A single chair. A young woman, wrapped in a hospital blanket, sits with her arms tucked around herself like armor. Her face is gaunt, hair tangled, eyes wide and afraid. Lucas stopped breathing. It was her. Not a memory. Not a fantasy. Not a ghost. Sarah. Except on the recording. She didn't call herself that. What's your name? The question came from off-screen. A nurse, maybe. Calm. Routine. The woman hesitated. Then, softly. I don't know. Do you remember where you're from? A pause. A flicker of pain crosses her face. No. Just water. Screaming. And cold. That's okay. We're going to help you. You're safe now. We've given you a temporary name. Until you're ready. She nodded slowly. Eyes cast downward. What name? Grace. Grace Thomas. Another pause. Then, almost to herself. Grace. Lucas clutched the edge of the desk, his knuckles white. She hadn't chosen that name. It had been given to her. Assigned. As if the person she'd been before was inconvenient. An identity, too complicated to preserve. They didn't help her heal. They made her forget. He fast-forwarded the footage. More questions. Blank stares. The slow emergence of this new version of her. Tentative, obedient, easy to mold. A perfect blank slate. And then, eventually, the sheriff's voice. I'll take her from here. The timestamp was 3 weeks after her admission. Lucas paused the video. His reflection stared back at him from the dark laptop screen. Jaw clenched. Eyes burning. They'd stolen her. Not just her life, but herself. He copied the footage to his drive, slipped it into his coat, and backed out the way he came. The library was quiet that afternoon. Sunlight filtered through the windows in long, golden ribbons. Dust danced in the beams like ash suspended in time. Lucas stood just inside the doorway, heart rattling in his chest like a caged bird. She was at the front desk, carefully labeling a stack of returned books, humming faintly to herself. Lucas clutched the small box in his hands. Wooden, polished, worn smooth by years of touch. A delicate, hand-carved musical jewelry box. Their initials, L+S, still faintly etched into the lid. He stepped forward. Grace. She looked up slowly. Her smile faltered. You again. Her voice was cautious but not cold. I asked you not to follow me. I know, he said softly, placing the box on the desk between them. But I had to show you something. She didn't reach for it. What is it? He said nothing. Just turn the tiny brass key and let it play. The mechanism inside clicked once, then began to hum. A soft, haunting melody filled the space. Fragile piano notes dancing through the library's silence. Can't help falling in love. Their wedding song. Grace went still. Her lips parted. Her eyes slowly widened, shimmering in the light. Lucas didn't breathe. At first, she simply listened. But then, without realizing it, she began to hum along. Quietly, instinctively, each note like a thread pulling her back through the dark. And then, she whispered the lyrics. Wise men say, only fools rush in. Her voice cracked. But I can't help. She stopped. A single tear slid down her cheek. Her hand rose to her lips, trembling. The color drained from her face. Lucas leaned closer, his voice low and thick with emotion. You sang that to me on the dock, remember? The night before our wedding. We danced barefoot under the stars. Just us. Her eyes were locked on the music box now, filled with something raw, something ancient, something real. I know this, she whispered, barely audible. I've been there. Lucas nodded, eyes burning. You have. With me. Your name is Sarah. Sarah Rains. We were married. You had a life. A past. You weren't made here. Her breathing grew shallow, erratic. No, I can't. You can. Because it's still inside you. They didn't erase you. They buried you. But you're still you, Sarah. She clutched the edge of the desk, head bowed, shoulders shaking. The melody wound down, each note slower, dimmer, until the final chime faded into silence. When she looked up, tears ran freely down her face. But her voice was steady now, filled with something new, recognition. Lucas, she whispered. He nodded, eyes wet. I'm here. And for the first time in 7 years, she saw him. Not as a stranger, not as a ghost, but as the man she loved. The change in her was immediate. After the music box, after that fragile whisper of Lucas, something inside Grace, or Sarah, fractured open. The name she'd worn for 7 years no longer sat comfortably on her tongue. Her memories hadn't returned all at once, but something vital had been unearthed. A seed. A crack of light in the dark. They met in secret over the next 2 days, behind the church at midnight, near the edge of the woods where no one watched, whispering plans like fugitives. She asked questions now. Real ones. What happened to me? Why didn't they tell me? Why did I trust him? Lucas answered with as much gentleness as truth allowed. He showed her documents, photos, the video from the rehab center. Her own voice, saying, I don't know who I am. Each piece hurt her, but each piece made her stronger. On the third night, she whispered, I want to leave. Lucas didn't hesitate. We will. They plan everything. At midnight, she would slip away with Mercy through the back gate near the garden shed. Lucas would wait at the edge of the forest road with his rental, repaired, barely functional, but enough. From there, they'd head for Helena. Safe territory. A federal field office where someone might actually listen. She packed a small bag, a scarf, an old photo Lucas gave her, a snapshot from their wedding, his arms around her waist, the lake glimmering behind them. The night of the escape arrived cold and wet, fog curling low around the trees. Lucas waited exactly where they agreed, his heart pounding, so loud it was hard to hear the cicadas. At 12:07, he saw her silhouette moving quickly across the backyard. But behind her, a shadow. Too close. His instinct screamed before his voice could. Sarah, run. A beam of light cut across the yard. Sheriff Kent's voice boomed through the fog. Grace, get back here. Sarah froze, but only for a second. Then she bolted. The sheriff was faster than Lucas expected, howled something unintelligible, and charged toward her. Mercy barked wildly, teeth flashing. Lucas leapt from the truck, sprinting toward the fence, breath sharp in his chest. Sarah stumbled, but didn't fall. She vaulted the fence with a grunt, landing hard. Lucas grabbed her hand, pulled her into the truck. They slammed the doors just as Kent reached them. His fist hit the window, rage in his eyes. Lucas peeled out, gravel spraying behind him, tires shrieking on the wet road. In the mirror, Kent's figure faded into mist, but not for long. Within minutes, headlights appeared behind them. Bright, angry, too close. The chase had begun. Sarah clutched his hand, knuckles white. He'll never stop, will he? Lucas's jaw was tight, eyes locked on the road. No, he said, but neither will I. The road twisted violently through the forest, slick with dew, headlights bouncing off pine trunks like lightning in a bottle. Lucas gripped the wheel, jaw clenched, every muscle in his body locked tight. Sarah sat beside him, pale but steady, one hand wrapped around Mercy's collar to keep the dog calm. Behind them, those headlights, getting closer. Then a crack, gun fired. The rear windshield exploded, glass showering the back seat. Lucas swerved hard off the road, onto a logging trail. Dirt kicked up behind them in thick, blinding clouds. He didn't slow. They needed to make it to the ranger station. That was the plan. The only plan. Another shot rang out. Then tires screeched behind them. A truck was gaining. The sheriff wasn't going to arrest them. He wasn't going to threaten them. He was going to end this. Once and for all. They burst through a clearing. The ranger's outpost loomed ahead, a skeletal building tucked against a ridgeline, its single antenna stretching toward the sky. Lucas skidded the truck to a halt. Go, he shouted. Inside. There's a radio. Sarah didn't argue. She ran, Mercy at her side. Lucas turned just as the sheriff's black truck came crashing through the trees. Headlights off, silent and monstrous. Kent stepped out, his face a grotesque sculpture of fury and betrayal. You don't understand what you're doing, he growled, pointing the pistol at Lucas. She was safe with me. Lucas didn't flinch. You kept her in a cage. She didn't want her old life. You don't know what she was like, broken, useless. I gave her purpose. You gave her a lie. Lucas snapped, lifting his hand slowly. From inside the outpost, a voice crackled on the emergency radio. Sarah, calling for help, giving her name, her real name. The sheriff heard it too. His hand trembled for just a moment. Then, a siren. Not his. Multiple sirens. From the woods behind them, red and blue lights burst through the darkness like salvation. 3 state police cruisers roared into the clearing, tires screeching, officers pouring out with weapons drawn. Drop the gun, one shouted. Kent spun, eyes wild. She's mine. You don't know what she... Bang. A single shot. The sheriff collapsed. Alive, but bleeding. Officers moved quickly, cuffing him as he screamed, incoherent and furious. Lucas stood frozen, chest heaving. Sarah ran to him moments later, throwing her arms around his neck. They didn't speak. There were no words. Just relief. Just breath. Just the end of a long nightmare. The next morning, the town was different. News spread quickly. Lucas handed over the video, the forged papers, the tape from the clinic. It was more than enough. Kent was charged with unlawful detainment, obstruction, abuse of authority, and falsification of public records. At the diner, people whispered. Faces that had once been politely blank now bore shame. Irene, the retired nurse, stood beside Lucas and spoke to reporters. Others came forward. He scared us. We thought she was just his wife. I should have said something. Fear had ruled Old Pine for too long. But now, truth had cracked the surface, and tyrants can't live in the light. The mountains outside Bozeman were beginning to bloom when Sarah walked barefoot through the grass behind the cabin. Early morning dew clung to her steps. A soft wind stirred the trees, whispering through pine needles like distant voices finally at peace. She no longer flinched at the sound of rustling leaves. It had been 3 months since the arrest, since Old Pine became a headline, since she began peeling back the layers of someone else's life. Her life. Grace Thomas had vanished, and Sarah Raines was beginning to return. It wasn't fast, and it wasn't easy. The doctors called it dissociative trauma-induced amnesia, a protective blackout triggered by extreme psychological shock. Lucas just called it survival. Therapy helped. Familiar places helped more. But it was the little things, the smell of the old blanket in their bedroom, the soft scrape of her favorite mug, the tune of the music box on quiet afternoons, that anchored her to the past she thought she'd lost forever. Some days, whole memories would come back like a flood. The feeling of sand between her toes on their honeymoon in Oregon. The way Lucas always stirred his coffee counterclockwise. The tiny scar on his chin from a high school bar fight he swore he didn't start. Other days, the fog held fast, and Lucas never rushed her. He was there, always, with gentle patience and steady hands, like a lighthouse she could find even in the darkest tide. They spoke less of the in-between years. He didn't ask what Sheriff Kent had told her. She didn't press him about the investigations. They both knew there was enough pain in those blank spaces to last a lifetime. Instead, they focused on now. Here. Home. That evening, they sat on the porch in silence. Mercy lay curled at their feet, tail twitching in her sleep. The sky was streaked with lavender and gold, the first stars beginning to blink through the veil. Sarah held the music box in her lap. It was closed, silent, but her fingers ran across the carving like it was braille. Lucas, she said softly. He turned to her, eyes already full of unspoken things. She looked at him, really looked, like she had that day in the library, when her heart remembered what her mind could not. Did you wait for me? Lucas smiled, eyes shining in the starlight. Always. She reached for his hand, and this time, finally completely, she knew it.